Prologue. The cost of a crust. The cold storage closet is barely wider than a broom cupboard, its walls sweating with damp and the sour scent of mildew. Cheap cologne clings to the air like a warning. At 12, Elara is still thin enough to slip between shadows, still soft enough to believe hunger is the worst pain a child can feel. But survival has its own price, and tonight she learns it in the most brutal way possible. The groundskeeper holds out a stale crust of bread, its edges hard enough to scrape her palm. Her stomach twists with need, a hollow ache that drowns out every instinct telling her to run. When he closes the door behind them, the world narrows to darkness, the scrape of boots on concrete, the trembling in her small hands. Below the floorboards, a choir rehearses for Sunday service, their voices lifting a hymn of grace that floats upward like a cruel joke. Each note is a blade, gentle, bright, and mocking, as if the heavens themselves are singing over a crime they will never stop. In that cramped room, something inside Elara fractures quietly, almost politely, as though even her breaking must be small enough not to disturb anyone. By the time she steps back into the hallway, bread clenched in her fist, she is no longer the girl who walked in. Something innocent has been scraped out of her, leaving behind an emptiness where a childhood should have lived. That night marks the moment her world turns to ash, silent, choking, and impossible to brush away. Chapter 1. The Hollow Echo. At 18, Elara moves through the city with the quiet precision of someone who has learned to make herself invisible. The rain always seems to find her, sliding down the cracked roofs of old buildings, dripping from rusted gutters, soaking through the thin jacket she bought from a charity bin 3 winters ago. The streets glisten with oil, rainwater, and the faint reflection of neon signs that promise warmth she can't afford. Every morning begins the same. A palmful of coins, counted twice, then counted again, as if the math might suddenly change and stretch enough to buy something fresh. It never does. The man at the corner bakery knows her routine by now. He eyes her with suspicion, but still slides yesterday's bread across the counter when she pushes her coins forward. It's never soft anymore, but Elara has stopped expecting softness from anything. The shelter system is a maze, underfunded, overcrowded, and watched by police who treat every empty bed like a battlefield. Curfews are strict, tempers are shorter, and Elara has learned that staying unseen is safer than asking for help. She moves through the city's cracks the way water slips between stones, quiet, persistent, impossible to catch. Her Omega status hangs over her like a scarlet mark. She can feel eyes on her in diners where she sometimes lingers for warmth, pretending to study the menu while scanning for exits. Men look at her hunger as though it grants them permission, like want is an invitation instead of a wound. She knows better than to hold anyone's gaze for too long. A glance can turn into a misunderstanding, and a misunderstanding into a threat. In dark alleys, her body becomes currency again. Not because she chooses it, but because predators can smell vulnerability the way wolves scent blood in snow. She has learned to keep her steps brisk, her shoulders squared, her fear buried deep beneath the calm mask she wears like armor. The hollow ache in her stomach is constant. Sharp some days, dull on others, but always there. An echo of the night everything changed. Some people measure their days by time. Elara measures hers by hunger. Hunger for food, hunger for safety. Hunger for a life where she is not something to be taken, bartered for, or hunted. Yet beneath the exhaustion, beneath the grit and the cold, a stubborn ember still burns in her. She doesn't know what to call it. Hope, anger, defiance. But it keeps her moving, keeps her alive. And in a city that feeds on the weak, simply staying alive is its own kind of rebellion. Chapter 2. An Offer in a Storm. The storm hits fast, one of those ruthless city downpours that feels like the sky has split open. By the time Elara reaches the shadow of the Blackwood corporate tower, she's already soaked through. Water clings to her hair, dripping into her collar, turning her thin clothes into a second skin. She presses herself under the awning, arms wrapped around her ribs, trying to keep the cold from gnawing straight into her bones. People rush past her, umbrellas snapping open like black wings, their footsteps quick and sure. No one looks at her twice. No one ever does, except him. A sleek black car pulls up to the curb, engine humming. A quiet, expensive sound that doesn't belong anywhere near someone like Elara. The back door opens and a man steps out, framed by the glow of the tower's entrance lights. Tall. Sharp suit. Dark eyes that track her with an unsettling intensity. She recognizes the name before she recognizes the face. Kaelen Blackwood, the billionaire alpha everyone in the city knows by reputation alone. He shouldn't be looking at her, yet he is. For a long moment, he doesn't say anything. His gaze moves from her shaking hands to the puddles forming around her shoes, to the defeated slump in her shoulders. Not in disgust, not in pity, but in a way that feels assessing, as though he's piecing together a story without judging a single part of it. "You'll freeze out here," he says finally, his voice low and even. Elara doesn't answer. She's learned silence keeps her alive better than conversation. He nods toward the open car door. "Come inside, just warmth, nothing else." She hesitates, instincts clawing at her. She's stepped into cars before. None ended safely, but the cold is a blade against her spine, and his tone carries none of the predatory edge she expects. After a moment that feels like surrender, she climbs in. The warmth hits her like a physical blow. Heated seats, soft leather, the faint scent of cedar instead of mildew or sweat. She shivers harder, as if her body doesn't know what to do with comfort. Kaelen enters after her, closing the door. Now they're alone in a quiet bubble, rain pounding against the windows like fists. He studies her again, calm, controlled, unreadable. "You're Omega." Not a question. Her throat tightens. "Yes." "Alone?" She nods. His jaw sets, a subtle shift, but she sees it. Anger, though not at her. Then he reaches into his coat and pulls out a slim folder. He doesn't hand it to her immediately. Instead, he lays it between them on the seat like he's placing a weapon on the table. "I don't make offers twice," he says, "and I don't sugarcoat truths." He pauses, watching her reaction. "I want a marriage. In name only. Public, legal, permanent." Her breath stutters. "What I offer in return is simple. Protection, shelter, food, medical care. A life where no one touches you without permission." His words slice through the fog in her mind with brutal clarity. "It's a contract," he adds. "A cage, yes, but one where nothing and no one will ever harm you again." She tries to speak, but her teeth chatter too violently. Kaelen softens, just a fraction. "Elara, I'm giving you a choice. Not a fair one, but a real one." She thinks of the streets, the alleys, the men who follow her if she walks too slowly. The hunger that chews at her from the inside. The closet years ago. The rain pressing cold fingerprints into her skin. Slow death, or a cage with locks she can at least predict. Her voice cracks as she whispers, "I'll take it." Kaelen exhales. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Something heavier. Like he understands the weight she's just agreed to carry. "Then it begins tonight," he says gently. And just like that, the last fragile thread of her hope snaps. Not in despair, but in surrender to a future she never imagined choosing. Chapter 3, A Gilded Mask. The wedding unfolds like a performance she's been dropped into without rehearsal. Cameras flash in rapid bursts, each one catching a different angle of the stranger she's become. The gown they put her in is worth more than every shelter bed she's ever slept in combined. Silk that clings to her like another woman's skin, shimmering under chandelier light. Makeup artists dab and blend until her face reflects a version of beauty she's never known. But the eyes staring back at her in the mirror remain hers. Tired, uncertain, waiting for something to go wrong. Kaelen stands beside her as the ceremony begins, composed and unreadable, every part of him perfected for public viewing. He touches her elbow only when required by the choreography of their roles. The press eats it up. His associates murmur approval. Socialites eye her like she's an auction item someone overpaid for. Rags to riches orphan, one whispers behind a jeweled hand. Omega charity case, another mutters. Elara Blackwood, the efficient finally declares. The name sits heavy on her tongue as she repeats it, sealing a union she barely understands. The applause that follows is loud, warm, and empty. An orchestra of strangers celebrating a marriage built on survival, not love. The reception is worse. She is paraded through banquet halls, asked questions she has no safe answers for, complimented by people who don't bother disguising their curiosity. Kaelen shields her when he needs to, steering her away from prying reporters, cutting off invasive conversations with a single look. But even with him standing a breath away, she feels alone in a room full of polished masks and sharpened smiles. By the time the night ends, Elara's feet ache, her cheeks burn from forced smiles, and her muscles tense from holding herself upright under the weight of every gaze that judged her worth. And yet the true fear begins only when the bedroom door clicks shut. Silence drops between them, thick and suffocating. The lavish suite gleams with gold accents, a far cry from the cold concrete floors she's known, but luxury doesn't quiet the panic humming in her ribs. Kaelen stands near the window, jacket off, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looks less like a billionaire and more like a man carrying his own storm inside him. He doesn't move toward her, doesn't touch her, doesn't lay claim to anything. This is the part everyone expects, he says quietly. But you and I made an agreement. This marriage remains exactly as we defined it. She exhales, shaky and small. Not because she doubts him, but because the reality of a legal bond, a lifelong contract, hits her all at once. She is tied to a man she barely knows, bound to his world, his name, his rules, his protection. A gilded cage, as he warned. She sinks onto the edge of the enormous bed, fingers twisting the hem of her gown. For the first time since she accepted his offer, tears burn hot behind her eyes. Not from fear of him. He has done nothing to hurt her. But from the realization that survival has carved her into someone who no longer recognizes softness when it's offered. Kaelen watches her with an expression softer than pity, deeper than concern, something troubled, almost remorseful. I won't touch you, he says, and I won't ask for more than you agreed to. The promise should comfort her. It does, but only partly. Because safety, she is learning, can feel as heavy as danger when you've never known it. The city storms outside the windows, lightning flickering against the glass. Elara wipes her eyes and forces her breathing to steady. Tonight, she isn't fighting hunger or men in alleys. She's fighting the weight of choosing a future she can't walk away from. A gilded mask for a gilded life. And beneath it, a girl who still hasn't learned how to breathe in a world that suddenly expects her to shine. Chapter 4. The Cord of Understanding. Elara sits on the edge of the bed, body coiled tight, breath held in that familiar way she learned as a child, bracing, waiting, shrinking into herself before anything can happen. The silence stretches long enough to scrape her nerves raw. Every instinct tells her to fold inward, to disappear, to prepare for a night she never wanted. But Kaelen doesn't approach her. He moves slowly, deliberately, settling into the armchair across from the bed instead of stepping toward her. The lamp beside him throws warm light across his face, softening the harsh lines she's grown used to seeing in photos and headlines. In this quiet room, he looks strangely human. Tired, maybe even lonely. You don't have to be afraid of me, he says gently, not as a reassurance, but as a truth he intends to honor. Elara swallows hard. People say things like that, she whispers, right before they prove themselves liars. His chest rises with a slow, controlled inhale. He doesn't deny it. He doesn't get offended. He takes it in like someone who understands exactly why she said it. "My childhood wasn't like yours," he says finally, voice low. "But it wasn't soft either." She lifts her eyes, surprised. Men like him, men with wealth, status, entire empires, aren't supposed to have scars, not the invisible kind. "I was raised in a museum," he continues. "Cold walls, quiet halls, perfection demanded, affection withheld, everything polished, nothing alive." Elara watches him, drawn in despite herself. "My value," he says, "was measured by performance, by legacy, by how well I carried my father's expectations." A pause, a bitter twist of his mouth. Love was conditional, or non-existent. A different hunger, a quieter type of starvation. He stands slowly, not with dominance, but with care, as though approaching a wild creature he refuses to spook. When he reaches her, he kneels, not beside her, but in front of her. A man who could command nations chooses to meet her at eye level. Elara's hands tremble in her lap. "Show me," he murmurs. "Where it hurts." She doesn't know why she does it. Maybe it's the softness in his voice. Maybe it's the exhaustion of carrying everything alone for too long. Maybe it's the way he hasn't taken anything from her. Not even the space she occupies. She shifts the strap of her gown, letting it slide down her shoulder. A faded scar curves along her collarbone, pale and uneven. One of many marks carved by a world that saw her hunger as an opportunity. Kaelen doesn't touch her at first. He only studies the scar, not with pity, but with quiet reverence. Then he leans in and presses a gentle kiss against the mark. Light as breath, warm as a promise. A kiss of understanding, not ownership. Something inside Elara cracks open, softly this time. Not like shattering glass, but like ice thawing after years of winter. Her throat tightens. Tears hit her lap before she even feels them fall. "Hey," he whispers, reaching up but hesitating inches from her cheek. He waits for her to nod before wiping the tears away with the back of his knuckles. She breaks. Sobs shake her shoulders, tearing their way out of places she's kept locked since she was 12. She cries for the girl in the closet, for the teenager running through alleys, for the woman she is now, sitting in silk she doesn't feel worthy of. Kaelen slides onto the bed beside her, not touching until she leans toward him on her own. Then his arms fold around her. Steady, warm, protective without being restrictive. For the first time in her life, being held doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like shelter. No demands, no hovering menace, no hunger aimed at her. Just a quiet, shared ache. Two people from different worlds, shaped by different wounds, finding a single note that resonates between them. The room feels smaller, softer, almost sacred. Their silence merges into something new. No longer the chilling emptiness she feared, but a gentle, steady duet. A chord of understanding neither of them expected. And for once, Elara lets herself sink into it. Let herself be held. Let herself breathe. Chapter 5. The Symphony of Strength. The charity gala glitters like a world sculpted from glass. Fragile, luminous, and full of reflections Elara still isn't used to seeing herself in. She wears a gown tailored to her frame with reverence, not decoration. Her hair is swept up, her posture tall, and her name whispered with admiration rather than suspicion. People greet her with smiles crafted for cameras, but she meets each look with a steady grace that once felt impossible. For the first time, she moves through a crowd and feels untouchable, until she sees him. The breath leaves her body as though someone has punched her beneath the ribs. The room blurs at the edges, sound muting beneath a low, familiar roar in her ears. The man standing near the champagne tower looks older than memory painted him, but the eyes, those greedy, evaluating eyes, are exactly the same. The groundskeeper. Her ghost. Not skulking down an alley, not lurking in a shelter. But here, among the wealthy and respectable, wearing a suit he doesn't deserve and a name tag he surely didn't earn. He looks at her the same way he did when she was 12, measuring what he can take. But this time, she isn't alone. Kaelen senses the shift in her before she even speaks. His hand settles at the small of her back, firm and grounding. "Who?" he asks quietly. She flicks her gaze toward the man. Kaelen's expression doesn't change, but something cold and lethal settles behind his eyes, an alpha's fury simmering in silence. He doesn't move to confront, doesn't drag her behind him. He simply anchors her, giving her the choice he knows she's earned. "You don't have to face him," Kaelen murmurs. "Not here, not ever." But she looks at the man again and realizes something startling. She isn't shaking. Her voice isn't trapped in her throat. Her body isn't curling inward. She stands taller. "I'm tired of running," she whispers. Kaelen nods once, like a king acknowledging another monarch. "Then I stand with you." She steps forward first. The gala seems to hush as she approaches, though she knows that's only her pulse pounding in her ears. When the man finally recognizes her, his smile flickers, falters, collapses entirely, because she is not the child he cornered in a storage closet. She is Kaelen Blackwood's wife. She is wealth. She is power. She is protected. "Elara?" he stammers. She stops a safe distance from him, not out of fear, but because she no longer gives him the right to get any closer. "You don't get to say my name," she says, her voice calm, steady, and far stronger than she expected. A few nearby guests glance over, sensing tension but staying politely curious. Cameras hover. Perfect. "You are one of the people who made sure I never had a childhood," she continues, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "You hurt a hungry little girl, and you thought she'd never grow into someone who could speak your sins out loud." The man pales, glancing around as if anyone here would protect him. No one does. "Please," he whispers, "we don't need to make a scene. You made a scene the night you put your hands on me." She lifts her chin. "Tonight, I reclaim it." The murmurs swell, a ripple passing through the gala like the shifting of an orchestra preparing for a final, triumphant note. Elara doesn't shout. She doesn't tremble. She uses the tools of her new world: status, elegance, language sharpened with truth. "You took something from me when I was too young to understand what I deserved," she says. "But you don't own any part of me now. Not my fear, not my silence, not my story." Kaelen steps closer, not in front of her, but beside her. Her equal, her fortress. She feels his presence like a shield forged from iron and devotion. Security moves in seconds later, responding to Kaelen's subtle nod. They don't ask questions. The man is escorted out. Protested excuses falling flat against the grandeur of a room that now sees him plainly for what he is. When he disappears from sight, something inside Elara, a thread woven long ago from shame and terror, finally snaps free. The applause starts softly, then grows as people understand what they witnessed. Not scandal, not drama, a survivor reclaiming her crown. Elara exhales, her shoulders loosening as if shedding years of invisible weight. Kaelen's hand slides into hers, warm and sure. "You didn't just stand tall," he murmurs. "You rose." She looks up at him, eyes brimming, not with fear this time, but with strength. Real, earned strength. "I'm not who he made," she says. "No," Kaelen agrees, brushing his thumb over her knuckles, reverent. "You're becoming who you were meant to be." And as the orchestra in the corner swells into a rich, triumphant melody, Elara realizes she isn't just surviving anymore. She's conducting her own symphony. Epilogue. A new song. Morning light spills gently through the nursery curtains, turning the room gold. It warms the soft blankets draped over the rocking chair, glows against the pastel walls, and settles like a blessing across the tiny crib at Elara's side. She holds their daughter close, her small body curled against Elara's chest, breathing in quiet, steady puffs that smell of milk and innocence. The baby's weight is comforting, a reminder that Elara's arms, once empty and defensive, now hold life instead of fear. She rocks slowly, letting the chair creak in a soft, familiar rhythm. Then she begins to sing. Not a hymn borrowed from a chapel, not a song from a radio. This lullaby belongs only to her, woven from her breath, her history, her healing. A melody she created piece by piece during late nights and early mornings, when the world outside was silent enough to let her remember who she was becoming. It's a song of safety, of softness, of strength carried gently instead of hidden away. And when she sings it, she feels every version of herself. Hungry child, frightened teenager, guarded bride, leaning in to listen. Kaelen steps into the doorway, still barefoot, still half asleep, his hair rumpled in a way only fatherhood can achieve. The moment he hears her voice, he pauses. Then he crosses the room and places a hand on the back of the rocking chair before leaning down to press a kiss to Elara's temple. He doesn't speak. He simply begins to hum beneath her melody, low, deep, steady. It wraps around her voice like a shelter, grounding her song without overpowering it. Their daughter sighs and drifts further into sleep, comforted by a harmony that exists only between the two people who created her. The sound they make is imperfect in the most beautiful way. Real, human, warm. A chord born not of talent, but of truth. Elara closes her eyes, swaying gently, letting the moment settle into her bones. She remembers storms, hunger, closets, cold nights in alleys. She remembers contracts made out of desperation, the weight of a silk gown that didn't belong to her, and the night her past walked into a ballroom expecting her to break. And she remembers how she didn't. Her journey was never about climbing from poverty to wealth. It wasn't about a mansion replacing a shelter bed. It wasn't about titles or money or the wedding photos that line the downstairs hallway. It was about finding harmony after a lifetime of dissonance, learning to trust a world that had once taught her fear, learning to love in a way that didn't cost her pieces of herself, learning that survival can grow into strength and strength can grow into joy. She looks at her daughter, soft cheeks, tiny fingers, a future untouched by cruelty, and feels a fierce, warm certainty fill her chest. She will protect this child with everything she is, not with rage, not with silence, but with the beautiful music they've created together. Kaelen's hand drifts to hers, their fingers intertwining over the baby's small body. Their voices continue, her melody, his harmony, blending into a lullaby that fills the room with a quiet promise. This family will not be built on fear. This home will not echo with empty rooms or cold expectations. This child will inherit a world shaped by love, not survival. Elara presses her cheek to her daughter's head, feeling the soft tuft of hair beneath her chin. For the first time in her life, she isn't listening for danger. She's listening to the music of her own making. Steady, warm, and beautifully new. A new song. A new life. A new beginning.